Happy New Year. I've seen my first new film of the year, and it was Mary Poppins Returns. I'm a huge fan of the original. Grew up watching it, seen it many, many times. I actually got the Blu-ray of it for Christmas. So I was very excited about seeing a new one, quite apprehensive. It's a sequel that has none of the original creative team and none of the original cast returning to their roles. And I was weeping with joy for the entire first hour. I couldn't believe that they got it right. It feels authentic. It feels like a continuation of the first film. It's been very carefully calibrated, I think, to match the style and tone of the first film. And it gets it right. It gets the essential elements exactly right. The story's been updated to the 1930s, so it's about 20 years later. Michael and Jane Banks are now adults. Jane is following on from her mother's example of being a suffragette. She is a campaigner for workers' rights, while Michael has been married and then widowed and has 3 children, and now faced with the prospect of the house being repossessed by the bank and the children having to grow up faster than they might normally because of having to fill the gap left by their mother's death. Mary Poppins returns to look after the bank's children, all 5 of them, and is accompanied by a new Bert stand-in, Jack, played by Lin-Manuel Miranda, whose accent, I'm delighted to report, is not good enough. It is exactly not good enough in the way that Dick Van Dyke's was not good enough, which meant that it fit perfectly, and I was delighted. If it was too good, it would have spoiled it. The music is all new. There are elements of the original songs woven into the score, but the actual songs are all completely new. But there are echoes of the original film. There is a segment in an animated environment. There is a trip to the bank. There are echoes of the original story. There's a visit to a relative, played in this version by Meryl Streep. There are echoes of the film all the way through. It very much feels like a sequel rather than a completely fresh element of the story. But that's often what was the case with P.L. Travers' Mary Poppins stories, that they would rework elements from previous stories and not necessarily become completely new, completely reinvented. Emily Blunt as Mary Poppins is completely perfect. Not just practically perfect. The moment she appears on screen, I was sold. And that's pretty impressive, I think, because there was an apprehensiveness, but the fact that I was sold so completely, straight away, I think speaks very highly of her. It's a fantastic performance. She's closer to the prickly, vain character of the books, but still has that heart of warmth and compassion and kindness. Miranda is terrific. He sings and dances. He even gets to do a little rap in one song, which feels like it's more related to the ancestry of the patter song, of the kind that would be period appropriate for music hall. So there's a kind of shared ancestry there in musical terms. The cast is generally excellent. I thought Meryl Streep was hamming it up a little bit in her small role, but it's a brief role, and it's a Mary Poppins film, so a little theatricality I think is understandable, in the same way that there are quite a few black characters in the film, which for the 1930s I thought, this doesn't strike me as terribly plausible for a real film, but this is a Mary Poppins film, this is a fantasy, so it's fine. Historical accuracy is not necessarily an absolute requirement. There's not like there's any mention of Hitler or anything. There are some negatives, and it's only a few. I thought that some of the songs were a little repetitive, some of the lyrics felt overly repetitive, and the plot as a whole is a bit too schematic. One thing that I like about the original is there's no real villain. It's just circumstance. In the case of Mary Poppins Returns, they have to pay off the debt, on the house. Okay, but there's a villain character who is actively trying to repossess the house for reasons that aren't really explained other than him just being an evil banker. And it felt, and there's a race against time at the end, and it felt like it's trying too much to force it to adhere to screenwriting structure and screenwriting tropes rather than just let it breathe. I can't see how they could have fixed that inherently in the material, but it just felt a little bit too written, which was a shame. But the film has so much charm and so much warmth and so much style and so much talent and so much genuine sincerity in what they're doing that it really gets past any misgivings that I might have had. It's stated in the film that anything is possible, even the impossible. And to demonstrate that fact, more than 50 years later, they made a sequel to Mary Poppins, and it can stand quite happily and quite appropriately beside the original film. And I would have thought that was impossible.